We saw what happened during COVID. So you have all these people that are paid with inflation, that are paid to just take their paychecks and do what they're told, and that's what they've been trained to do for decades. And they've been doing it. They've been doing it benignly for many, many years, like all the way back from the 30s, 40s, 50s when the inflationary process started. But generations of this will get people to just not think about the evil that they're being told to do because they've lost their ability to think because they've been just inflation receptacles for so long. Hey guys, Rafi here from the Endgame Investor. We've got something different for you today. I've got Phil Lowe on the line with special guest Will Pope, who is one of the only January 6th defendant. I don't know if he's the only one, but he's one of the only ones who successfully defended himself. He was facing 30 years in prison, up to 30 years in prison, and he got off scot-free. Not that he did anything wrong, of course, he didn't. And he'll
Totally
tell,
innocent.
yeah, he'll tell his story. And the point of this, though we are, of course, a monetary channel, I am a monetary channel, and Phil is sometimes my co-host. We try to connect all the evil that's happening in the world to the monetary system, and we'll get back to that after Will tells his story, and we'll try to trace the effects to ultimately the dollar and inflation. And how do we get out of this? Well, the end game will take us out of it, and Will is a really good representative of the fact that tyranny can never be complete. There is always a spot of good left, and no matter how corrupt the system is. So, Phil and Will, take it away, and let's hear what you have to say.
Sure. So I'm not sure I've ever told this story publicly, but I was at January 6th. Did you know that, Rafi?
I did not know that, Phil.
I
Why
did. I
why do
was
you
so
hide
Wow.
things from me? What is your problem?
I was at the rally. I went to the rally. I'm not big on voting at all. I do vote. I've made two videos on the subject. In fact, after Trump was inaugurated, I made a video saying, "Don't get your hopes up, guys. This is probably gonna go very poorly." But I do vote. I do think there's something there, just not a lot. And I had never in my life been to a presidential rally. So this was Trump's, and I don't live in a swing state, so the presidential candidates never come to where I live. And so Trump was doing a big thing in DC, and I think this was, 2020. So I was thinking, well, this might be Trump's very last rally. This is probably going to be some sort of historical event. I better go check it out. And lo and behold, it absolutely was a historical event. So I went to the rally, and I have two things to say about that. While I was walking there, if you remember the picture of the shaman in the Capitol building, there is a guy behind him waving a Confederate flag. Do you remember this picture?
Yep.
You remember it? Okay. I saw that guy on the mall. He was walking around waving the flag, and he was standing all by himself, completely by himself. Everyone was avoiding him like the plague. He was the only Confederate flag in the entire rally, and he was just standing there walking around, you know, parading around with the Confederate flag, nothing else to say in the matter. And then I saw him later, and I was like, "Wow, how did that guy get like weird?" And I never actually saw him at the rally itself. Like when I was at the physical rally, I never saw a Confederate flag guy again. He was just standing off to the side, waving the flag around. Then when I was after the rally, when everyone else was marching off to the Capitol building, my knees were tired. I was standing all day. I was like, you know what? I'm tired. Trump lost anyway. This is not gonna happen. So I'm just gonna go home. So I was walking home, and there was a black guy with a megaphone standing on the lawn, actually about the same area, almost the same area where Confederate flag guy was. And he was shouting in the megaphone, "This isn't a black thing or a white thing. This is an American thing. We need to take back our rights. We need to go, do." I don't think he said storm. I don't think he said we need to go into the Capitol like Ray Epps, but he was
Hmm.
definitely getting the crowd riled up as the crowd was filing from the rally to the Capitol building. Now, once again, I was heading a different direction. I'm just like, I'm gonna go catch the train back home. As I'm walking, the a black like Secret Service car, one of those like undercover cars that is clearly a federal car but not, comes roaring by with the lights roaring, and I think that might have been around the time Ashley Babbitt was shot. I see it in my text on my phone. Vice President Pence refuses to, do whatever they would ask him to do. And then as I'm on the train home, all the events of that day are like, rapid scrolling through X. So we might have bumped into each other at some point, Will. I don't know, but I'll let you take over and tell your side of the story now.
Yeah, I mean, those are unique observations. Everybody had a different vantage point of the day. Everybody took a different path to get there. Everybody had different life experiences from which they viewed the day. And so, like you had a piece of like the full truth of what happened that day, and maybe nobody else saw exactly what you saw. So hearing that from you right now, like gives me a little bit more information, right? So yeah, there were maybe a couple Confederate flags there, but that guy was definitely prominent. He did get arrested. He's a guy from Delaware. Um, but yeah, some
Is he
people
a
have
Fed?
uh, not that I'm aware of,
Okay, he
but
was he was just
like
maybe he got MK Ultra'd. Okay.
yeah, I mean the difficulty with that question is you I mean, you have to do a lot of research to be able to prove it via open source means. Ideally, our government would come out and tell us, here are the people who were feds that day, but they haven't done that yet, which is unfortunate. But yeah, but kind of along with your perspective there, like as I was walking down to the Capitol after President Trump finished speaking, like there were some people who had a merch table, and I remember this vividly, and they had like a bunch of apparel with Confederate flags on it. And I thought, why in the world do you have that out here? Like, we don't want to wear, put that away. I literally told them, put it away. Like, that's not who we are. But in retrospect, I'm thinking, was that part of like a trap? Were they trying to like get people branded to make the event look, because they tried to portray it that way as a bunch of,
Yeah.
white supremacists who were protesting, even though it was a very diverse crowd. And even though, like me, I used to work for the National Park Service at an all-black historic town, so like I've done, a lot of work related to that, and I'm in no way racist in any way, but they tried to portray it as that. So yeah, that is a unique observation you made, and I do think there were some people intentionally, you know, doing controversial things or instigating the crowd
The
or
way that media is funneled today, it would be extraordinarily easy for an institution with the resources of the federal government to make it look like any rally is a neo-Nazi or a Confederate Civil War or whatever rally by just taking a few pictures of people with Confederate flags, paying off the
Mhm.
appropriate Twitter accounts, and then just creating these viral posts and putting a budget behind them. It's very easy to do.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure you've seen various controversies in society, and maybe there'll be like one conservative protest group and one liberal protest group, or maybe it's like a trans, a drag time story hour, and they'll have a bunch of protesters, and it's these weird groups clashing with each other, and you always have a couple of videographers there, and then their clip goes viral on social media. So a thing that nobody would even care about ends up becoming a huge cultural clash, and everybody is talking about it and outraged about it. And I do think that there are bad actors involved in doing that. So
So how did
it
you
seems
end
to be a
up in the
pattern.
Capitol building?
So yeah, interesting story. So after I walked down to the Capitol, the west side I felt was too crowded. I was with my brother that day, and so we decided to walk around to the east side. And so we got there, and it looked like at our perspective, the police were allowing people in. We had gotten up on a planner to kind of view things, and then I looked back at one point, and I didn't know it at the time, but there were a couple people that had been pulling gates away, and then they started streaming in, and it just looked like the police were retreating and letting people in. I'm like, wow, they're letting people onto the plaza here. So we got off the planner and we walked forward, and there were already like 200 or 300 people in front of us by that time, which the video clearly shows. But and then so there was another line of bike racks, and as we walked up to that, there were some people that came and pulled it into everybody, right? And so it was like cutting me at my knees almost. And like my natural reaction from playing football is you try to like hit it off you, like if anyone's like trying to cut you at the knees. And it felt like that, like someone was trying to cut me at the knees with that bike rack being pulled into me. And but anyway, they were able to like break the bike racks apart, and then people went on to the full plaza. But I didn't know it at the time, but there had been another effort to get onto the East Plaza at the center line, and they had been doing it for like 15 minutes. They'd been clashing with police for about 15 minutes. So, like one of the first things that I began studying when I like even before I began representing myself was how did the events on the East Side unfold? So, like I had to find little clips of video to piece all that together. And nobody was paying attention to the East Side at the time because they were mainly focused on the violent clashes that happened on the West Side of the Capitol. But so eventually, you probably know Pizzola broke the window, and other people were breaking windows, and they climbed in and went into the building, opened the door. A bunch of people streamed in. We were on the other side of the building from that, and some of those people ended up going down a hallway and going out a door underneath the northeast steps, which is the Senate carriage doors. And my brother and I, we saw like protesters streaming out of the Capitol. And we're like, why are there protesters in the Capitol? And so, kind of a curiosity thing, we walked up there to check it out. And one of the guys who had come through the building, like, he paused after going out and then he decided, hey, I want to get back in. And he like tried to push his way past police. And we were just kind of standing there at the door observing like everything that was going on in that hallway. But they pushed him out. Then he came behind me and he began like repeatedly shoving me, like lunging into me and pushing me into the building. And I couldn't even see because I had a flag draped over my shoulder, so I couldn't even see like who was pushing me at the time. And I thought it might have actually been a cop because it was someone saying, go in, like almost like command voice, right? Well, in my case, I asked for information on that guy for 2.5, 3 years, and they never wanted to provide it. And finally, like I'd filed a motion, and the judge said, "Hey, if you have information on this guy, you have to provide it to him." And so eventually, they arrested this guy about the time of my first trial date was. My first trial date got continued because of the Supreme Court ruling. So that the government decided they wanted to figure out how that ruling would apply to my case, and so they moved to continue. But yeah, it turns out that guy like had been given a security clearance by the Biden administration after January 6th. Like he's prior military, and he was working at a base in Indiana where they support like Joint Special Operations Command and tech research and whatnot. So I've got a couple motions on that if you're interested. But anyway, so we were in the Capitol for a little less than 20 minutes. We never destroyed any property. We never harmed anyone. We got back out. Like we were getting kind of a weird vibe though. It's like, let's get out of here. And so we left the building probably a few minutes before Ashley Babbitt got shot. We were actually some of the first people in there, but we were the only two to, my brother and I, to go through the Senate carriage doors to enter that way. And so we left through the memorial doors and then we left Capitol grounds, I think about 2:47 or so. I'd have to check the time again, but so we left Capitol grounds before like any of those clashes in the tunnel even began, and a lot of the really ugly things occurred. But yeah, that's just a brief kind of snapshot of my day, but it led to a 4-year battle because I was facing, charges, federal charges, 30 up to 30 years in prison. And that kind of took over my life for 4 years.
Uh, so if you did nothing violent, how do you get, what was the charge of like that they said you deserve 30 years in prison for trespass?
So there were 8 different charges. There were a couple that were like unlawful entry, which were misdemeanor charges, right? Not that much. I think half a year to a year. But the two big ones, the biggest was the 20-year felony obstruction of an official proceeding, 1512 charge. And that's the one that eventually got thrown out by the Supreme Court. But for 4 years, almost 4 years, the government was accusing me of committing that crime of obstruction. And the Supreme Court then ruled that, hey, it doesn't apply to how you're applying it. But I mean, my name's already defamed, and like I've had to fight it. Like when that is your major charge, that's kind of the dominant feature of the case, and the reason that you have to fight that hard, right? The other fairly big charge was civil disorder, a 5-year felony, which depends on other people being violent. So even if I wasn't violent, and I wasn't, like if other people were being violent, they can charge you for civil disorder. That accounted for 25 years, and then there were 6 misdemeanors, which accounted for the other 5. And 2 of those misdemeanors, I was able to beat pretrial through motions and show that, I didn't actually block ingress or egress to the building.
Okay, so if I understand this correctly, one charge got dropped because of the Supreme Court, and then you had to deal with the other one?
Correct.
I
So,
mean, of the big ones, I mean.
yeah, so one got dropped by the Supreme Court. 2 of them I beat through pretrial motions, and then I had 5 remaining. And initially, my trial date was scheduled to be July of last year, 2024. And because the Supreme Court ruling came at the very end of June, just about 3 weeks before my trial, the government wanted more time to figure out, how the Supreme Court ruling was going to apply to all the cases. Like, could they keep the charge for whoever, they were going to try to keep it. But they wanted to continue the trial date and figure that out. And I was okay with that because whenever you have more time, you have more opportunity to win. And so they continued it, and I got a December trial date after that. I think it was December 2.
Did you have
And
any legal counsel, or did you defended yourself entirely the whole time?
so initially I did have appointed counsel, and they weren't communicating well. One guy didn't even know how to use a computer.
Must be an on button somewhere. Press the Apple thing.
And I had begun like researching the video on my own, and I developed, pretty good expertise on kind of the facts of what happened that day. And I felt like I had an advantage if I were able to like get full access to the discovery and kind of figure out like what happened that day. And I
And
figured
do
I
you
could
have
poke
legal
holes.
training?
Not really. Like I am in a
Wow.
PhD program for like leadership communication, has nothing to do with law, but
Still, that's you're a very brave man to think you can go up against the DC system like that.
yeah, and I did not take that decision lightly, and I don't recommend anyone take it lightly. Like the one thing I realized I didn't know a lot of the law in the process, and I had to kind of learn on the fly. Like the only reason I would recommend representing yourself is one, if you're totally being screwed over and you have no effective counsel, but also you need to be able to like bring a quality to it that no attorney is going to be able to bring. Like if you don't have a skill set or a special ability that can give you an advantage, I wouldn't recommend doing it. But I thought it through, and like nothing else was working, and so we had to try a different approach. And
Would you describe your judge as having been fair to you? Like the judge, I'm not talking about the prosecutor, because I mean the rumor is the judges were, terrible.
out of all the judges, my judge, like he was the most lenient probably on sentencing.
Okay.
However, like I mean, there are a few um, orders that he has made that I don't agree with at all, right? And um, yeah, I mean there are definitely conclusions where I don't think he was fully fair, but like probably I had a better shake with him than I would have with most other judges. So like he is an Obama appointee, but he's also the guy who like ordered the release of the Hillary Clinton emails back in the day. So I mean you
Mhm.
gotta kind of look at it both ways, right?
Right. So, my question is like an emotional one. When you're facing 30 years in prison for, well, and you know that you're innocent of any wrongdoing because you're
Hmm.
yourself and you know what happened from your side.
Hmm.
How do you control yourself? I mean, and I'm asking this because a lot of our audience is very nervous about the the impending disaster that's going to come to the world because of the collapse of the monetary system, and they have to kind of, we all have to kind of go through this head first and just deal with it. So your situation would be a perfect microcosm or example of, it, shit's falling from everywhere and you're the only one that can deal with it and you've just got to go forward. How do you steel yourself like that?
Yeah. You have to remain calm anytime you're in a crisis, and it's not easy because like literally the odds I was facing at the time were like 0% odds. Like it was going to be assured conviction, right? But I was able to kind of strategically play it to where I kept giving myself a chance and giving myself a chance, right? So never give up. You got to resolve to persevere no matter what happens. But yeah, there've been a couple situations in life where I've been in situations like that. I had a kayaking accident in Yellowstone one time. I capsized when the waves picked up, and I was in cold water, very cold water for 3.5 hours. And survival rate for that is uh, zero as well, right? So you have to remain calm. And there is like, if you get in cold water and you know you have like less than an hour to live statistically, like there's a panic that tries to come over you. Like you have an hour left to live, right? And you're never going to see your family again or finish whatever project you were working on. But you got to continue to calm down. And it isn't easy. And with the January 6th case, like the first year was pretty tough because my entire life was like imploding day after day, week after week. Um, and you have to weather that. And then at some point you have to get over the fear of being thrown in prison for 30 years, and you have to just have the mentality, I'm going to fight back no matter what, right? And um, yeah, I mean, there is no perfect recipe for it, but remaining calm and weathering the adversity for as long as you can will give you a chance, right, in any situation. Um,
Were you surprised by the tyranny you experienced? Because I think a lot of Americans thought that we were living in a democratic republic where the government was represented by our, elected representatives, and that it filtered through, and we lived in a more just society than the rest of the world. And for a lot of people, I think January 6th was a very rude awakening. Now, Rafi and I have a theory that the inflation is causing our government to be far more tyrannical than it was, that we did, in fact, in the good old days, have a much more free and just government, and we're just living off that memory of it. And that once the currency collapses, the inflationary, Ponzi scheme that we're going through collapses, we have a very good chance to return to the free democratic republic of a prosperous race of men. But a lot of people, I think, are shocked when they encounter tyranny they did not expect.
yeah, and I don't fully know all of your like financial theories and
Sure.
um, but like as far as the prosecutions we faced, yeah, it was unprecedented. Like they had never attempted anything like that in history. We had just been through 2020, and there was all kinds of rioting and destruction, and hardly anyone was held accountable. In Portland, they arrested a lot of people for assault on a federal officer, and they ended up giving them like diversions to where they didn't have anything on their record, right?
Yeah, slap on the wrist. Yeah.
And but you compare that to January 6th, and you had entirely peaceful people that were hunted down and faced years in prison for, First Amendment activity. Um, and just like even the people who were violent on January 6th, and I don't condone violence. Now, some of them, I think the contact might have been incidental. So just because they're charged with assault, I don't like lump them into being a bad person. But like there were a few that were clearly violent, and but even them, Oftentimes they couldn't get like release conditions, and even federal judges will even give release conditions sometimes to people who do very heinous things. But yeah, I had a podcast with former Capitol Police Chief Sund about a week or two ago, and he pointed out that typically, if you have a protester in the Capitol building, they'd get three warnings, and then it would be like a $50 ticket. And I didn't get the offer of the $50 ticket. I faced 30 years in prison, and it took 4 years of my life to fight it. And not only that, like it was the biggest story in the media, and there's like an ongoing defamation from that. So yeah, I call it radical government extremism, like that weaponization of government, where like government just goes to an extreme and they forget the humanity, and they forget kind of the principles by which we were founded. So yeah, I mean, we don't want tyranny, and we got to continue to push back to make sure there isn't tyranny. And I think we got to do it through the legal process. But yeah, if you don't oppose tyranny, it'll take over.
The way I think about this is that the state has become so monstrous because it can generate so much money just by printing it, and it's called the Cantillon effect, where the people standing closest to the money printer get all the benefits of the money. So the state can yield infinite resources to crush a man like you, right? It could have 12, like Derek Chauvin. There were like 12 prosecutors, right? Because they all
Mhm.
wanted a piece of that action. Uh, Whereas, they could have had 12 prosecutors in your case, and and you would still be
I had
just,
more than 12, I think.
you had, yeah, okay, yeah, they had a legion, they can dedicate the almost infinite amount of time and money and effort just to crush little old you, right? I mean,
Yeah.
to what end? What is the point except to say, don't you dare stand against the wheels of the state?
Right, right. It's an exercise of power. So now I remember what I was going to say. That the mechanism of how inflation works, meaning how the government gets its money,
Hmm.
right? They sell bonds, and then in the inflationary process, if the public buys the bonds, that's not inflationary. But in the inflationary process, the Federal Reserve, the central bank, buys the bonds and adds to the currency supply, right? And then the government gets that currency that it can spend before prices rise, and the act of spending it raises prices for everybody else. So they get first dibs, and they're like there's like a huge bucket of wealth, and they're the first to like sip from it. It's like a sort of like financial prima nocta, the first night, that they would do in the Middle Ages. Um, so I'll give the example of something my wife is going through here, and I'm in Israel. Is that she's in a very simple case. She's working for the local government in a gymnastics activity for kindergartners, first graders, second graders, right?
Hmm.
And the people that run the local government, because the government has to be in charge of the schools here, because we're in a communist state. Israel sort of, it was founded by communists. It's not completely communist, but it leans much more heavily in that direction in the United States. And she's trying to get things done, but the people that are in the administration of this local government are completely incompetent, right? They think they're doing work, and they might even try to do actual work, like, but they can't do anything because they don't understand what accomplishing anything actually is. They think the process of pretending to work, like how communism worked, I'll pretend to work, you pretend to pay me, and they pay you with fake money for work that you never did, or you said that you did because you clocked in, you clocked out. Like there's nobody there, there's nobody home. So the government, meaning the local government here, gets its inflation from the Knesset, which is in Jerusalem, and they funnel money here because we're like a welfare town. So they pay off whoever is the friends of the local government to staff these positions, and they're all incompetent, and that's what happens. And then my wife tries to do this activity, and she can't do it because she's got no support. So in your case, it's the same thing. It's just a lot more malevolent. Right? The government gets the inflation, and they hire people who forget the principles because they're all in a process, right? My wife could have become one of them. She could have just said, okay, well, I'm going to pretend to do this activity for this after school activity for the kids. I won't actually be teaching gymnastics because I've got no support, but I'll pretend that I am. and then I'll just get my paycheck and that's it. But my wife is not that kind of person. So what the U.S. government did on January 6th, and it wasn't just January 6th. That was just one part of it. There was also COVID going on, and there was the Trump's Twitter account being banned from Twitter, and
Yep.
Amazon coming down on Parler, and there was like this. It reminds me of like Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, where he goes to execute Order 66 or whatever it was, and then all the evil comes down and like shocks everything at the same time in every part of the world.
Execute Order 66. Execute Order 66.
That's what 2021 felt like to me. And it was like the inflationary system was activating all of the evil it had put in place for decades and activating it all at the same time and saying, do this now. And all of the NPCs, all of the non-playable characters who are lawyers or law enforcement in Washington and whoever is staffed in whatever the government was able to pay off with its inflation, activated everything at the same time and shocked the system with a whole bunch of evil because very few people were able to stand up to it. We saw what happened during COVID. So you have all these people that are paid with inflation, that are paid to just take their paychecks and do what they're told, and that's what they've been trained to do for decades. And they've been doing it. They've been doing it benignly for many, many years, like all the way back from the 30s, 40s, 50s when the inflationary process started. But generations of this will get people to just not think about the evil that they're being told to do because they've lost their ability to think because they've been just inflation receptacles for so long.
Yeah, 2021 was definitely kind of an Orwellian dystopian year, especially as a January 6th defendant where your life is being crushed and you're seeing a lot of that firsthand. I think COVID put the world in a weird mindset, and a lot of people, their natural reaction was to mandate, enforce, and just crush freedom and forget about like the civil rights that we've always had, which eventually there came to be a pretty strong pushback on that because people said, hey, that's not okay. But yeah, we went through a real weird period, and hopefully that won't happen again. But I think, every generation is going to have to stand up and defend freedom for themselves because crises will emerge and there will be people who have that knee-jerk reaction to take it over the top. Now, as far as inflation goes, like um, I'm not as focused on the economic policy as you guys are, but I definitely think like we've made mistakes in our country that have hurt everybody, including like the quantitative easing in recent years, which has just kind of transferred wealth to like larger corporations, and it makes it more difficult for people to buy homes and buy land. And
Yeah, well,
so,
first and foremost, it transfers wealth to the government, and they decide where it goes from there. The first ones to get it is Congress. They spend whatever they want. They buy off their buddies in the corporate world, which creates the corrupted, fascist-like system that we have. That gets worse with the inflation.
yeah, I mean, and they're adding to the debt, but yeah, the quantitative easing is a big issue, and inflation has hurt everybody. Like anyone goes to the grocery store, you're feeling that. Um, you know,
Oh, just wait.
yeah, just wait. I get the feeling like your theory on it is there will be kind of like a complete collapse of the currency, is what you were saying.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, we are leaning towards a crack up boom. Yeah.
Yeah. And that, I mean, the one thing that allows America to be kind of the major superpower in the world today is the dollar being dominant, right? And anytime you have network dominance, there's some power in that. But in recent years, you've seen kind of the diversity of currency used in the world. Like we're losing our share because, we've done things that have screwed over other countries, or they don't like our inflation or whatever. But yeah, I think in the future, you do have to kind of think about like, what will my dollar be worth in 10 years? It's not going to help me to have
Keep it
$10,000
around.
in the bank,
Yeah.
right? So it may help me to have a shovel because the shovel will retain value, right? Or your bar of gold or whatever will go up in value.
Now, let
But
me ask you something. One thing I've noticed on your tweets is that you've expressed disappointment with with Trump 2.0.
mhm.
I've made, like I said before, I've made two videos on this where I just said, don't get your hopes up, people. Like Trump he cannot spin straw into gold. It's not possible to do so. So, I expected very little, and I've got even less than I've expected so far. Yeah, I wonder about you.
Yeah, well, let me put that in context. So the first part is like Trump did drop all remaining charges. Like for me, he ordered the Department of Justice to drop the remaining five charges on me. So I'm very grateful for that. However, Trump also campaigned on investigating what happened that day, and we need to get to the truth of that. A part of me thinks that he still wants to do that, but we're not really seeing action, and I'm not sure he has like competent, qualified people in there who are looking into it, right? Or who are motivated to look into it. And it is a very complex thing to dig into. So, I do support the president, but I also like action is the only currency that I believe, right? Words don't matter too much, right? Your words are like in your terms inflationary, right? You use enough of them and they lose their value.
Right, you're starting to get it now. Yes, this is how we see
Yeah,
things. Yeah.
yeah, but so I'm not like anti-Trump at all, but I do need to see action. And I think if we don't get it cleaned up now, it may be much worse a few years from now. So, um, and kind of like the reference you made, like the Biden administration, they were like actively weaponizing government. And the Trump administration, while it may not be perfect, like they may have a little bit of incompetence here and there, which they do. Like they're not like actively weaponizing government against most people, right? There may be issues here and there that I'm not aware of, but um, yeah, like we're in a much better place than we were under Joe Biden.
Um, so that time when you were in a river, freezing for 3 hours and you thought you might die and you had to control your panic, and you had to do the same thing this time for 4 years. And I would assume that that had you not almost died in Yellowstone, that maybe you would not have had the skills to calm yourself during these 4 years where you're facing basically almost an entire life in prison. I don't know how old you are, until you're an old
I'm
man, I would
I'm
guess.
getting older now. I'm
Yeah.
39 now.
Yeah, so you would have been almost 70 coming out. Um, if we are correct, there are two about a crack up boom in the end of the dollar. There are two opposing um, results, sets of results in this sort of event. One is chaotic, right? And picture a zombie apocalypse, but not exactly that. Something with like chaos in big cities because the dollar doesn't work, so people can't trade. Like the only reason that we don't eat each other alive is that we wake up in the morning and we know what we have to do. We know basically where we fit into the division of labor. And without a functioning dollar, that's much harder to do. But on the other hand, money will reassert itself. And I use the word money as opposed to credit, the dollar being credit because it began with gold and then you just built a whole bunch of debt on top of that. But the gold is still there. So once all the credit gets wiped out and we return to money itself, we will be able to sprout up from pockets of American values and everything that the country was founded on. Everywhere else in the world, whatever the best parts of each country or of each culture will reassert themselves because they'll have to. Because the worst parts of it will be eating itself, because when an NPC when an inflation receptacle, someone paid with inflationary money who hasn't thought about anything in decades, suddenly doesn't have any inflation to feed himself with, then he doesn't know what to do. He's totally lost. So there's going to be some chaos, but on the other hand, there's going to be a lot of good people like you and others like you in all the countries around the world that are going to rally and put their communities together. Where do you think you would fit into that in terms of growing your local community? What would you do? What do you think you would do? Your first steps would be in a situation where the dollar just doesn't work anymore. Um, not like an SHTF plan, like beans, bullets, and band-aids. I'm saying mentally, like what do you wake up and you're like, okay, this is the world now. Now what do I do?
Yeah, and I think like mentally I'd begin right now. I think you can't live in fear. Like, right, even if a bad situation occurs, right, you got to be able to control the fear. But um, today, like I would say, like prepare yourself as far as developing new skills, right? So, like you view gold as an asset that will retain value, but like probably the only thing that I've invested in my life that I still have are like my education and my skill set, right? So like the more perspectives you can acquire in life and the more skills you can acquire, those are going to have value. And like if situations do turn bad, then you're going to have a mentality, a creative mentality that'll let you kind of use what resources are available to you and make the best of them, right? Um, like even when I was in the lake in that cold water, right? I carried a handgun in bear country in case I ever ran into a bear, right? I didn't want to have to use it. I had bear spray too, but
Ah, not a bear in sight. The Bear Patrol must be working like a charm.
like that was a second option. But your mind goes into like a really creative thing when you're in a crisis situation like that, and you consider all options. And at one point, I thought, hey, I've got a gun in my dry bag. Like I could just fire some shots in the air to signal for help. But then I got down to the last round and like my mind began considering like, would it be better to use that on myself to avoid like the pain of drowning or whatever that death might be? Like my mind was that creative. I'm not suicidal, but my mind was that creative that I was looking for any out, right? And then I decided to fire that bullet in the air just because I didn't even want to consider that option. Like I've got to keep fighting. So in my mind, you've got to resolve to persevere regardless of what happens in life. And like rather than me trying to go through a scenario, a hypothetical scenario of what will happen if the world goes bad, like I'm going to try to be optimistic in life and I'm going to try to develop myself. And, I'll be prepared for whatever situation arises when it comes. But yeah, I mean, could the monetary system fail? Yeah, that is a possibility. I do think that uh, there are a lot of governments that are going to try to keep it going, though. So it would have to be a pretty right. I mean, it would have to be a pretty crazy thing for them to not. So I get what you're saying. Like I think there will always be inflation, but I do think just choosing what to invest your like time in as far as education and skill set is probably just as valuable as investing in resources.
On that, we all agree, I'm sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. It's yeah, yeah. I would definitely want you in the compound, the zombie apocalypse compound with me. You're invited to my compound when you.
Well, hopefully we won't have one, but yeah, you never know. But I like having gone through what I've gone through, I try not to think in terms of that anymore. You take life as it comes to you, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. You had I was very inspired. I had heard of your story from I think Robert Barnes was talking about it a couple times. So I was
Mhm.
very inspired by your story and thank you for coming on and telling it because it really is an inspiration to stand against, tyranny on that level and win no less.
Yeah, happy to join you guys and you know, keep up the good fight, stay positive, and again, resolve to persevere regardless of what happens to you in life.
We will, and with your help, we'll do it well. Thank you.
Yeah, have a great day.